You cannot understand the Cold War without understanding Korea. The morning of June 25, 1950, shattered a fragile peace. Under the gray clouds of the Korean peninsula, 75,000 North Korean soldiers surged across the 38th parallel, and the world, already wary after World War II, was thrust into a new and terrifying conflict. This is the story of the Korean War, one of the most brutal, complex, and often overlooked conflicts of the 20th century. A war where ideology clashed with reality, and the Cold War turned hot for the first time. When World War II ended in 1945, so too did Japan's harsh occupation of Korea. But freedom came with a price. The victors of World War I, the United States, and the Soviet Union, quickly divided the peninsula along the 38th parallel. The North, under Soviet influence, saw the rise of a staunch communist regime led by Kim Il-sung. In the South, the United States supported a capitalist government under Syngman Rhee. Both sides claimed legitimacy over the entire peninsula. Neither accepted the 38th parallel as permanent. By 1948, two separate nations had emerged, and by 1949, Soviet and American troops had withdrawn. But tensions simmered. This was not peace. It was merely a pause before the storm. On June 25, 1950, that storm broke. North Korean tanks and troops smashed into the south in a lightning offensive. Seoul, the South Korean capital, fell within days. The Republic of Korea's army, poorly equipped and outnumbered, was pushed back to the last stronghold, the port city of Pusan in the far southeast. The world held its breath. Would South Korea fall entirely? Would communism spread across Asia like falling dominoes? President Harry Truman wasn't willing to find out. To him, Korea was more than a small, distant country. It was a test of will, of resolve, of America's promise to halt the spread of communism. He swiftly appealed to the United Nations. The Security Council, in a rare moment of alignment, authorized military support for South Korea. The Soviet Union, boycotting the Council in protest of Communist China's exclusion, did not use its veto. 16 nations joined the UN coalition. But in truth, this was an American war under a UN banner. General Douglas MacArthur, the hero of the Pacific, took command, and the defense of Pusan became a symbol of determination. Then came a bold move, one for the history books. On September 15, 1950, MacArthur orchestrated a daring amphibious landing at Inchon, behind enemy lines. The North Koreans were caught off guard. South Korean and UN forces surged northward. Seoul was liberated by the end of the month. But MacArthur wasn't done. He pushed beyond the 38th parallel, past Pyongyang, and to the Yalu River, the very border with Communist China. For a moment, it seemed the war might end with the total defeat of North Korea. Then came the dragon. On October 19, 1950, Chinese troops, over 250,000 strong, poured across the Yalu River under the cover of night. They were the People's Volunteers, but they were battle-hardened and ruthless. The UN forces were blindsided. Retreat turned into rout. Seoul was lost. Again, the tide had turned. MacArthur, unwilling to accept defeat, proposed using atomic bombs on China. President Truman refused. The general was dismissed. Containment, not conquest, returned as the guiding principle. By mid-1951, the front lines had stabilized once again around the 38th parallel. Hills were taken and lost, rivers crossed and recrossed, each side dug in. It was war without end. American pilots clashed with Soviet MiGs piloted by Russians in Chinese uniforms. A Cold War masquerade played out in the skies. Peace talks began in July 1951, but dragged on for 2 years. The death toll climbed. Civilians suffered in the crossfire. Yet no side could claim victory. In early 1953, a new American president took office, Dwight D. Eisenhower. A former general, he understood war's costs better than most. He pushed hard for a resolution. On July 27, 1953, after endless rounds of negotiations, an armistice was finally signed at Panmunjom. There was no peace treaty, only a ceasefire. The border remained exactly where it had started, the 38th parallel. A demilitarized zone, or DMZ, was established, a scar across the Korean peninsula that remains to this day. The Korean War claimed the lives of over 2.5 million people. It shaped the Cold War, defined U.S. military policy for decades, and split a nation in two. Yet, for many Americans, it remains the forgotten war. But it should not be forgotten. Because in Korea, the world learned that ideologies could ignite battlefields, that peace is fragile, that the Cold War could burn hot, and that even when a war ends, its wounds can last for generations. So, what does the Korean War teach us today? Perhaps that history is never distant, that conflicts we think are frozen in time can still shape the present, and that peace, real peace, is always worth fighting for, but never easily won. The Korean War left a deep, permanent imprint on the world, a legacy that resonates to this day, more than 70 years after the armistice was signed. It wasn't just a conflict confined to a small peninsula in East Asia. It was a showdown that defined the Cold War era and profoundly influenced international politics for decades. For South Korea, the war was a painful rebirth. Cities were reduced to ashes, the infrastructure was destroyed, and nearly a generation was traumatized by the upheaval. Yet from this destruction came renewal. South Korea transitioned from an agricultural society into a thriving industrial powerhouse, a dramatic transformation often called the miracle on the Han River. The country's remarkable recovery underscores its ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. Today, South Korea stands as a vibrant democracy, a leader in technology, education, and popular culture, a dramatic reversal from its precarious state in the 1950s. North Korea, meanwhile, fell under the rigid totalitarian control of the Kim dynasty, first Kim Il-sung, then his son Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un. The North chose isolation over engagement and remained a closed, oppressive state with a powerful military and a developing nuclear arsenal. The Korean Peninsula, divided by ideology and fortified by troops and barbed wire, has become a symbol of the Cold War's human cost, a permanent front line between two opposing worlds. Internationally, the Korean War defined the USA's Cold War policy of containment. It demonstrated America's resolve to resist Soviet and Chinese aggression and set a precedent for future interventions, from Vietnam to Afghanistan. It also paved the way for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, to become a key defensive alliance against Soviet expansion. Today, the legacy of the Korean War lives on, in the demilitarized zone, in the divided Korean families, in the ongoing diplomatic struggles, a powerful reminder that peace is fragile and hard-won, and that the past profoundly shapes our present and future. What might have happened if the war had escalated to nuclear weapons? What if the Korean Peninsula had been unified? And what lessons can we carry from the hills of Korea to the world we live in now? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you want more deep dives into history's most powerful moments, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. Thank you for watching.